The title of the lecture is Deconstructing Atheism, analyzing atheism's claims. The claim of atheism, if many of you have read books by Richard Dawkins, if you attend university and college, sometimes they give these books out freely, distribute the books. And many years ago, I read the book, The God Delusion. And in that book, he claims that the foundations of religion are based upon superstition. But interestingly enough, when we recite Al-Quran Al-Kareem, throughout Al-Quran Al-Kareem, these are just two examples, we read, فَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. فَعْلَمْ, know that there is no God, only Allah, no one worthy of worship, only Allah. So the foundation is built upon ilm, the very foundation of believing in God. And another example of this is the verse, لِتَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. لِتَعْلَمُوا, in order that you know, أَنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. So the order given in the Quran here is لِتَعْلَمُوا, to know. So the foundation of belief is based upon knowledge. Superstition, on the other hand, is defined as excessively credulous belief in and reverence for the supernatural. Credulous meaning disposition to believe with insufficient evidence. Disposition to believe with insufficient evidence, meaning if we believe in something without any evidence, then that would be termed as superstition. And the thing that we believe in, if that is excessively credulous belief in and reverence for the supernatural. So this is the atheist claim. And when we say deconstructing atheism, we must deconstruct this claim of the atheist. When we look at evidences, we have two. One is termed as rational, aqliya, rational evidences. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the theist would claim, someone who believes in a God, would claim that God or the designer of the universe has endowed creation with the rational faculty, al-aql. So when we talk from evidence, the first source would be the rational faculty, the mind. And the second would be transmission. Transmission, depending on what faith group a person belongs to. Some people would believe in transmission of the Bible, others would believe in the transmission of another religious text or religious tradition, and Muslims would believe in the transmission of the Quran and the sayings and actions of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But what makes Islam unique is that we claim that the authority of transmission is based upon the authority of the intellect. So the intellect is what makes someone believe in a divine creator. And based upon this is the foundation of La ilaha illallah, Sayyiduna Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, meaning the rational faculty. After a person has accepted this, then transmission is used as a source. So if we discuss with an atheist, we do not quote the Quran to them first. We discuss the existence of a creator, a designer. To quote the Quran to them or attempt to convince them of the Quran would not make any sense if we do not convince them with the rational faculty. Rational evidence, on the other hand, which the Arabs would say taqsim al-qiyas. We would say first proof, which is burhan, made from propositions that are certain. This would be a rational evidence. But then we have other forms of rational evidence which are mentioned, like argument, jadal. Jadal is assumption used for a basis in discussion. Then we have rhetoric or khitab, which is oratory skills. Someone may be able to convince you of an argument with their oratory skills or with rhetoric. Then we have poetical discourse, or when people use poetical language. For instance, an example they give in the books of mantiq, logic, is al-khamaru yaqutatun sayyalatun, which means that alcohol is a flowing sapphire, which has no reality. But this is poetic language, which may be able to convince some people. The fifth one is deceitful, sophism. The word sophism, in Arabic they refer to it as a sophastai, which is from sofa and asta. The meaning of sofa is hikmah, which is wisdom, and asta is talbis, to confuse someone. So a specious argument, apparently good or right, though lacking real merit. Now the second type, which is mentioned as argument, jadal. For instance, if we say to Ahlul Hind, people of India, ذِبْحُ الْحَيْوَانِ مَذْمُومٌ, that slaughtering an animal is despicable, the Hindus of India would accept this. This is an argument for them. But other people would throw this out of the window and would not accept this as a logical argument. So when Muslim theologians discuss the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what they base this upon is the first type, which is proof, burhan. This is known as burhan. This is the sole foundation of accepting the existence of God. We do not use jadal, which would be argumentation or assumptions used to convince someone. We do not use an assumption to convince someone. The third would be rhetoric, khitab. Oratory skills may differ from person to person. A person with superior oratory skills may be able to convince people of an argument which is specious in its foundations, like Hitler did in Germany. His oratory skills were unmatched. He was able to convince many people. The fourth being poetry. Poetry is not used as a source of evidence. And the fifth being deceitful, sophism or sophista, this also being something which is unconsidered when dialoguing with an atheist or with anyone else for that matter. So this burhan, which was the first one of the rational evidence, is proof, which in Arabic is known as burhan, would be divided into basic principles, fundamentals. For instance, in Arabic they call this awwaliyat. For instance, if we were to say the whole is larger than the part, this is something accepted. Common sense tells us that the whole is larger than the part. Or if we were to say one is half of two, this is something known as a basic principle, a fundamental rule which is accepted and acknowledged by everyone. Another type is empirical evidence, mushahadat, something which is observed. For instance, if we say fire burns is something, fire burning is something observed by everyone. And in the same way, if we say the sun gives light. The third one is syllogism, qadaya, in Arabic known as qadaya. For instance, if we were to say the number 4 is a pair, meaning composed of 2 and 2, it's a pair of numbers, the number 4. This is a qadiyya. The fourth being experimentation. Now, science would claim truth from this aspect, from experimentation. Tajribiyat or tajriba, which is experimentation. For instance, if you were to say to someone paracetamol gets rid of a headache, this is something tried and tested. People take paracetamol and it removes a headache from them. Something which is based upon tajriba, trial and testing. The fifth being intuition, which is known as hadas. We know things intuitively, something known without thinking, without doing fikr, the thinking process. You know that something, when the weather is cold, you know that the weather is cold through intuitively knowing so. And the sixth, this sixth one may in some aspects be unique to Muslims. mass transmission, mutawatirat. In some aspects, this is unique to Muslims. But mutawatirat, mass transmission, a famous example, if I were to say to you that Einstein found or discovered the theory of special relativity, for instance, or if we were to mention something well known, mass transmitted, that Shakespeare wrote Hamlet. This is something which has been mass transmitted from the time of Shakespeare writing his work. So these proofs are the foundation upon which we debate someone. We cannot debate them if they base an argument upon a fallacy. For instance, the fallacies being argumentation, jadal, something which is widely accepted by Muslims may not be widely accepted by others. For instance, if we say angels exist, we accept this. But an atheist would not accept this. He would say this is based upon superstition. But the foundation of argumentation would be the first, which is burhan, proof, which are these 6 basic principles: empirical observation, syllogism, experimentation. Remember, syllogism must be composed of valid propositions, and then experimentation, intuition, and mass transmission. So the result of any form of argumentation would impart any one of the following 5. Either it would impart knowledge, ilm, and we said at the very beginning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders us, فَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Know. So the first is knowledge. The second would be belief, i'tiqad. The second would be i'tiqad. The third would be assumption. And the fourth would be uncertainty. And the fifth would be illusion. So the first one, which is known as knowledge, ilm. The second one is known as i'tiqad. The third one is known as dhann. The fourth one is known as shak. And the fifth one is known as wahm. The theologians would state that the belief in a creator is based upon the first, knowledge. To the extent that in the books of ilmul kalam, the books of theology, there is a famous debate amongst the theologians. If someone has belief, i'tiqad, not based upon knowledge, is his iman, faith, valid or not? And there are a group of theologians who state his faith is invalid. And then there is a group of theologians who state that if he blind follows someone, he's a muqallid in faith, and that person he blind follows changes his belief, and he changes with him, then his belief, his faith is invalid. So the very foundations of faith are built upon knowledge. This is very important when discussing with an atheist, that we highlight that our faith must be based upon knowledge, upon ilm. If our faith is not built upon ilm, then we fall into the second category, which is belief. And this is disputed amongst our Sunni theologians as to whether this is valid or not. And any faith built upon assumption, uncertainty or illusion would be invalid. Now, when discussing with an atheist regarding scientific points, we must ask them also, are the scientific points that you are bringing up, do they impart knowledge? Do they impart belief, assumption, uncertainty or illusion? If our faith is built upon knowledge, then in order to counter our faith, the facts that are presented must also be knowledge. They cannot be assumptions, uncertainty and illusion. If someone brings the theory of evolution must impart certain knowledge. It cannot impart assumption, uncertainty and illusion. If it does, it cannot counter certain knowledge. And we would show also that our belief is built upon knowledge as opposed to the other 4. So here we have deduction types, inferences which are made from observing, mushahadat. For instance, we have the observation of cause and effect. Fire equals burning. This is cause and effect, meaning fire is the cause and then burning is the effect. We have effect on cause, like burning equals fire. If we see something burning, we know that the burning is caused by fire. And we have one cause and two effects. What would be the example of one cause and two effects? For instance, if you see a cauldron of water and fire, and the water is boiling, you know that the effects of the fire upon the water, one is boiling to make the water boil, and the other is to make the water hot. This is one cause and two effects. So when we observe things around us, we will know of cause and effect. Now, cause and effect would fall into which category of the previous, what we mentioned? Cause and effect would impart certain knowledge. Why? Because what we mentioned, basic principles. This is based upon basic principles, awwaliyat, and empirical knowledge also. This is something observed. This is also intuitive. This is also known through mass transmission and also experimentation. That cause, like fire burning, and burning is caused by fire, effect on cause, and one cause and two effects. Now, simple observations of the universe around us. One is everything that does not have existence from itself, its existence is from something else. Basic premise. Also, whatever was not and then came into existence has a cause. And number three, everything temporal, contingent, and dependent is caused by something. The meaning of contingent being, according to the Muslim theologians, al-wujud ba'd al-adam, which is existence after non-existence. That something has no existence and it comes into existence. These are three simple, observable facts. Everything that does not have existence from itself, its existence is from something else. Whatever was not and then came into existence has a cause. Everything temporal, contingent, and dependent is caused by something. Now, when a person would present science, we would ask which one of these basic points does science refute? Which one of these basic points? And what type of knowledge does science impart by refuting these basic intuitive facts? When discussing what is commonly mentioned is God, Jesus, Bible, priest, this one especially, organized religion, church, pope, jihad, holy war, sharia. These are ad hominem attacks upon the very belief of a creator. Why? These distract from the real issue, which is a cause, ultimate power, agent, omnipotent force, creator and designer. These are two different facts. If a person rejects a religion or organized religion, or rejects Jesus, Sayyiduna Isa alayhi salam, or rejects the Bible, or rejects the Quran, or rejects Sharia, or rejects holy war, or rejects jihad, or rejects the Pope, or rejects the church, this does not do away with the foundational point, which is that there is an ultimate cause for the universe, there is an ultimate power, there is an agent that caused the universe, there is an omnipotent force, there is a creator and a designer. So when discussing with any atheist, if they quote the Quran, in order to quote the Quran, that would mean that they, for instance, what is commonly quoted today is killing and violence in the Quran. But the question to the atheist would be, why would killing and violence be wrong for someone who does not believe in a creator? What is the moral argument for killing and violence being wrong? Maybe they can bring that up in the Q&A. Then, what is commonly presented is what is known as the Kalam cosmological argument. Now we know that certain Christians have latched onto this argument, but they acknowledge the fact that this argument was developed by the Muslim theologians, mutakallimun. Therefore the title, the Kalam cosmological argument. The argument is based upon simple facts. Everything that has a beginning has a cause. The universe began to exist, which is now something observable by observing the universe expanding. We know that the universe had a beginning. also proven by thermodynamics. And the universe has a cause. The cause is the originator. Al-muhdith lil-alam. The Arabs refer to this as al-muhdith lil-alam, the originator of the universe. Based upon the fact that the universe began to exist, the universe has a cause. Why? Because everything that has a beginning has a cause. And the cause is the originator. Al-muhdith lil-alam, the one who has brought the universe into existence. This is also based upon the fact that it is impossible the formation of an actual infinite by addition. You cannot have something being infinite. If someone states that the universe is infinite by addition, this is a logical absurdity. In the same way, a contingent infinite cannot exist. Something which is contingent in itself cannot be infinite. How is the universe contingent? When we observe the universe, the observable universe shows us that ajza'ul alam, which is parts of the universe, are something which come into existence and go out of existence. Now, if parts of the universe are contingent, this in effect would mean that the entire universe is also contingent. And the fact that the entire universe is contingent, otherwise you would say that the eternal universe is composed of parts which are contingent, and the eternal universe is dependent upon contingent parts, which does not make any sense. Because for something to be eternal, it needs to be eternal and self-subsistent. Self-subsistent. We cannot have something being eternal and being composed of contingent parts. Otherwise, the alternative to this argument would be it sprang into existence wholly uncaused out of nothing a finite number of years ago. Caused and came into existence out of nothing. This would be the alternative to this argument. The objections to the Kalam cosmological argument are three. Firstly, events have a cause. They state that why do you state that events have a cause? It is not necessary that events have a cause. This is the first objection. But this objection goes against rational reasoning. Which rational reasoning? Those basic principles of al-Burhan, that awwaliyat, something which is known, and hadasiyat, which is something known intuitively. We know everything around us, events have a cause. So by rejecting this, like Bertrand Russell, when debating Copleston on BBC Radio many years ago, he refused to acknowledge the terms. When Copleston mentioned the contingency of the universe, Russell denied the terms, saying that we just believe that the universe is there. It does not necessarily have to have a cause. So by denying terms or denying basics of the human rational faculty, an atheist would attempt to get away with this argument by saying events do not have a cause. But this is something known intuitively, badahatan. Secondly, explanations from outside of the universe. This is mentioned by people like Paul Davies and others, that why do we need to have an explanation from outside of the universe? Why cannot the universe explain itself? The reason for this is that it would lead to another logical absurdity, which is known as dawr, circular reasoning. What caused God? If you say God is the uncaused cause, the uncaused causer, the one who has al-muhdith lil-alam, the originator of the universe, then what brought God into existence? That would lead to tasalsul, continuous regression. Now, what are these two concepts known as dawr and tasalsul? Firstly, the impossibility of continuous regression and circular reasoning. Continuous regression would mean that if we say the universe is contingent, but it was caused by an alien life form, for instance, it was caused by an alien life form. The question would arise, what caused that alien life form? Then the answer would be another alien life form. The question would arise, what caused that other alien life form? the answer would be another alien life form. And this would lead to continuous regression. In the same way, you have Dawr, which is circular reasoning. What is circular reasoning? If I say A caused B and B caused A. And in the same way, if we say A caused B, B caused C, C caused A. This would lead to circular reasoning. This is why these objections, which are explanations from outside of the universe, not being illogical. It is illogical to say the universe has caused itself, because that would lead, if you say the universe caused itself, it would lead to circular reasoning. And if you say what caused God, it would lead to the irrational tasalsul, continuous regression. We would say that every contingent thing which is in the universe is caused by something which is self-subsistent, self-existing. And that self-existing cause of the universe is what we term as the creator or the designer of the universe. So science recently has made headway in attempting to answer this. We know of Stephen Hawking, who and the person who wrote the book recently with him, Leonard, they wrote this book, The Grand Design. What does the grand design forward? This is a quotation from Stephen. Because there is a law of gravity, the universe can and will create itself out of nothing. Now, based upon the logical points or the illogical reasoning, which is known as regression and circular reasoning, what would this lead us to? This is my ta'liq, my comment at the bottom. A law of nature depends for its own existence on the prior existence of the nature which it describes. How can you have the law of nature like gravity prior to the existence of anything? So for Stephen Hawking to say, because there is a law of gravity, the universe can and will create itself out of nothing. But how can you have a law of gravity prior to the very existence of nature and the world around us? So this is again would fall into circular reasoning. Circular reasoning being Dawr. Another quotation from Stephen Hawking. Remember, I've removed the mathematical mist. After you remove the mathematical mist, why is it mist? Because most people do not understand mathematics. In the same way I've attempted to, in this lecture, to remove the Arabic jargon and the myth of theology, the mist that surrounds theology for people who cannot access the books of theology. So here Stephen Hawking states, M theory, which is the multiverse theory, meaning that this universe exists amongst multiple universes, and many universes come out into existence within this multiple universes. M theory predicts that a great many universes were created out of nothing. Their creation does not require the intervention of some supernatural being or God. Rather, these multiple universes arise naturally from physical law. Naturally from physical law. So physical law gives this universe an existence, according to Stephen Hawking. This again would lead to Dawr, which is circular reasoning. How can we have physical law prior to the order of nature? We cannot have physical law prior to the order of nature, prior to the existence of a universe. How can laws exist without nature or without the existent universe around us? But he states that the laws of nature do exist. But this is an example, a clear example of circular reasoning. Then we have, remember Roger Penrose, a scientist who stated that regarding the chance of this universe, he said that in his book, The Emperor's New Mind, that the chance of the existence of this universe is 1 in 10 to the power of 123. 1 in 10 to the power of 123. So if we timed the number 10 by itself 123 times, this would mean what? a number too big to be written down in full, even if every proton in the entire universe were used to write a digit on. So if you took every proton in the universe and you wrote a digit, the digit 0, that is the chance, according to Roger Penrose, of having the existence of this universe. So we would ask, what is the existence of this universe based upon chance, necessity, or upon the originator of the universe? Al-Muhdith lil-Alam. So when we have something known as the design argument, which is used by scholars like Sa'aduddin al-Taftazani rahimahullah and many others, that would mean that the universe around us is finely tuned and designed. Now, for instance, pure mathematics applies exactly to the universe, and physical elements behave in periodic regularity, mathematically quantifiable and closely correlated ways, captured by pure mathematical formulae, meaning that the observable universe, everything we observe around us, fits mathematically, including elements around us. Those elements are in accordance with mathematics. Is this by chance? We would say this is not by chance. Now, 6 numbers that finely tune the universe is a reference to a book written by Martin Rees known as Just 6 Numbers. This is he places 6 numbers, these 6 digits that are placed here, stating that these 6 digits finely tune the universe. The first one, some of them that he mentions, for instance, this one that looks like N. He states, the cosmos is so vast because there is one crucially important huge number in nature, equal to 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000. This number measures the strength of the electrical forces that hold atoms together, divided by the force of gravity between them. If n had a few less zeros, only a short-lived miniature universe could exist. No creatures could grow larger than insects, and there would be no time for biological evolution. So he's a believer of evolution as well. He states evolution in itself would not have taken place if this number had not existed. Then another number which is like this number, which looks like an E, he mentions another number whose value is 0.007, defines how firmly atomic nuclei bind together and how all the atoms on Earth were made. Its value controls the power from the sun and more. And more sensitively, how stars transmute hydrogen into all the atoms of the periodic table. Carbon and oxygen are common, whereas gold and uranium are rare because of what happens in the stars. If this number, meaning E, were 0.06 or 0.008, we could not exist if this number was not around. And in the same way, this other cosmic number, omega, the cosmic number omega measures the amount of material in our universe. Galaxies diffuse gas and dark matter. Omega tells us the relative importance of gravity and expansion energy in the universe. If this ratio were too high relative to a particular critical value, the universe would have collapsed long ago. Had it been too low, no galaxies or stars would have been formed. The initial expansion speed seems to have been finely tuned. And regarding this lambda, this number lambda, he states, measuring the 4th number, lambda, was the biggest scientific news of 1998. An unsuspected new force, a cosmic anti-gravity, controls the expansion of our universe, even though it has no discernible effect on scales less than 1 billion light years. It is destined to become ever more dominant over gravity and other forces as our universe becomes ever darker and emptier. Fortunately for us, and very surprisingly to theorists, lambda is very small. Otherwise, its effect would have stopped galaxies and stars from forming, and cosmic evolution would have been stifled before it could even begin. And then he states regarding this one that alpha, which looks like a Q, he states, the seeds for all cosmic structures, stars, galaxies, and clusters of galaxies were all imprinted in the Big Bang. The fabric of our universe depends on one number, Q, which represents the ratio of two fundamental energies and is about 1/100,000 in value, or 1/100,000. If Q were even smaller, the universe would be inert and structureless, meaning it wouldn't exist. If Q were much larger, it would be a violent place in which no stars or solar systems would survive, dominated by vast black holes. And the sixth crucial number, which looks like a D, delta, the sixth crucial number has been known for centuries, although it's now viewed in a new perspective. It is the number of spatial dimensions in our world, D and equals 3. Life couldn't exist if D were 2 or 4. Time is a fourth dimension, but distinctively different from the others in that it has a built-in arrow. He carries on, but on the next page, I've underlined something which he states. He states, perhaps there are some connections between these numbers. Perhaps there are some connections between these numbers. He states further down, these 6 numbers constitute a recipe for a universe. Moreover, the outcome is sensitive to their values. If any one of them were to be untuned, there would be no stars and no life. He states, is this tuning just a brute fact, a coincidence? Or is it the providence of a benign creator? I take the view that it is neither. So he rejects a creator at the end. But the Muslim theologians have been using this argument for many years, that the universe that we live in is a finely tuned universe. Now, some of you may have heard of Watson and Crick. Who's heard of Watson and Crick? The founders of the double helix. Crick believed in what? Does anyone know of his religious beliefs? He was an atheist, but he believed that it is possible that millions of years ago, aliens came in spaceships and placed life on Earth. So now we turn to these rational individuals like Richard Dawkins. We've got a video to play of Richard Dawkins.
I'm very intrigued by Second Life, very interested in the concept of a virtual world. I suppose you could say that the creators of Second Life, the conceivers and programmers, have in a way acted in a godlike way. I mean, they have made a world in which people can live, and that is godlike. You could imagine a science fiction novel in which we, the real world, you and me, actually live. It turns out, we discover that we are actually living in a second life that's been created by some alien intelligence, some superhuman intelligence on another planet, perhaps, if indeed another planet means anything in the context of this discussion. So we are the computer simulation of an alien intelligence. That is the, quote, God that has created us. Well, it's an intriguing thought, and it's hard to disprove. But would that intelligence really be a God? That's the question that is interesting me now. Would that intelligence really be a God? And I want to say no, it wouldn't. It would have all the attributes of a God. It would be of gigantic intelligence. It would know huge amounts more about the laws of physics than we ever could know. It would be capable of feats that we could only dream of. And so in all sorts of respects, we would want to call it a God. We would want to perhaps worship it as a God. But it wouldn't be a God in the following very important sense. This alien intelligence would itself have had to have evolved by something like the same slow, gradual, incremental process as we evolved by, as in the real world, Darwinian natural selection. So gods, in my definition, are not just superhuman, godlike beings. They would have to be beings that, say, are eternal, beings that existed before the universe began and created the universe.
Don't let the Oxford accent confuse you. The thing is that what he's just said is that belief in an alien life form that placed life on earth is a possibility which is difficult to disprove. He didn't say he holds this position, but we know that Francis Crick held this position or proposed this belief that alien life form could have placed early life on earth. So the question here would be, that alien life form would have been created also by an alien life form. And what would this lead to again? Continuous regression. Richard Dawkins would have to admit that continuous regression is illogical and absurdity and superstition. Religion, or we would say the belief in an originator of the universe, is not based upon superstition. It is based upon rational reasoning. But Richard Dawkins himself has fallen into the same thing which he proposes regarding religion, which is that it is difficult to refute that an alien life form came upon earth and placed early organisms upon the face of the earth, which developed through the theory of evolution, and therefore we have humanity on earth today and other organisms, other creatures. This book which Richard Dawkins wrote, The Blind Watchmaker, was a reference to William Paley's argument regarding a watch. If someone is walking and they find a watch, is the watch designed or is the watch there by chance? And what he states in this book is biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose. So biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose. So even Richard Dawkins would admit that when observing biological organisms, the observation would lead one to think that these biological organisms have been designed. And he states that it is plausible in the video. There is another video as well. It is plausible that an alien life form could have come on earth and placed the early forms of life upon earth. Now, what do we mean when we say irreducibly complex or irreducible complexity? What do we mean by this? We state design inferred when parts appear arranged to fulfill a function. That when you have parts of something which seem arranged to fulfill a function, the more parts, more sophistication. The stronger the conclusion of design. Meaning purposeful arrangement, or those things in organisms which give the impression of something being arranged to fulfill a function, would give us the conclusion we are rationally justified in concluding that life was purposefully designed by an intelligent agent. This is from observation in biology. And this is what William Paley's argument was about. Now, even though 22 years prior, David Hume had written something which refuted the idea of William Paley's argument, remember when it came to William Paley's argument, the argument in itself was not refuted. What was refuted were other things which Paley mentioned. The argument itself was never refuted. It is not illogical for a person who is walking on the road and he finds a watch to conclude that that watch was made by someone. This argument has never been disproven by philosophy or biology. Even Richard Dawkins is unable to refute that argument. And when we say irreducible complexity, we would mean that organisms are so complex that if one function of those organisms is removed per the theory of evolution, because the theory of evolution proposes that we take incremental steps, organisms take small steps by which they develop. So that would mean something complex would have developed at a very basic stage. When it developed at a very basic stage, it developed itself to a very highly complex organism. So irreducible complexity would mean that if we remove any one of these functions from an organism, that organism would become defunct. It would no longer function. This is a famous example of a bacterial flagellum. Now this is a bacteria, and at the end you have this flagellum, which is a whip-like structure, which is composed of three things: a paddle, a rotor, and a motor. This is an example given by some creationist scientists. This is an example given by creationist scientists that this is irreducibly complex. That if you were to remove a paddle or a rotor or a motor from this bacterial flagellum, this would become defunct. It would no longer work. This is what we mean by irreducibly complex. Now, if we were to gather everything which is irreducibly complex and apply the theory of evolution would fall apart. Now remember, the theory of evolution, what we mentioned earlier, with regard to knowledge which is inferred, what did we state? We have knowledge, and then what do we have? What was mentioned? You have knowledge, you have belief, you have assumption, and uncertainty, and you have imagination. We would want to ask the atheist, where would the theory of evolution fall? Would it fall under knowledge? Knowledge means yaqeen, 100% certainty. The second would be belief, i'tiqad. The third would be assumption, dhan. The fourth would be uncertainty, shak. And the fifth would be wahm, which was imagination. Which one of these would evolution fall into? And here we have an example of a diagram of a cell. With this cell, you have something known as the cilium, which is also a whip-like structure which is attached to some cells, like the sperm cell, for instance. And the whip-like structure which is attached to a cell is known as flagella. Do not get it mixed up with the flagellum. It's a flagella when it's attached to a cell. The long cilium, this is known as. Again, the same problem is if you remove the motor, or you remove the rotor, or you remove the paddle, the action of that would become defunct. Now, a question for evolutionists would be, why would evolution be driven towards greater and greater complexity and resulting in intelligence? Why would evolution, this is a philosophical question, why would evolution be driven towards greater and greater complexity and result in intelligence? How does it result in intelligence? We are the result of evolution according to evolutionists, and we are intelligent. Human beings are intelligent. Or atheists would claim they are the acme, the pinnacle of intelligence. This is what they would claim. So why would evolution lead to complexity and intelligence? Another important point when looking at this is the lack of quantitative details. Estimation based on a proposed intermediate. What we mean by that is, in every other case of evolution, the evolutionists would propose an intermediate form. An intermediate form which is not quantitative in its details. And it is based upon estimation, based upon a proposed intermediate. So they give a proposition that this is the proposed intermediate, but they cannot qualify that through quantitative details. Meaning they cannot give enough details to qualify that this intermediate is something which is valid. So we have simple questions. Number one, evolution cannot account for the origins of life. Evolution cannot account for the origins of life. The main two foundations of evolution would be natural selection and random mutation. Natural selection and random mutation are not a sufficient explanation for the origins of life. In the same way, prebiotic fluid, where supposedly amino acids became proteins, those proteins became organisms, cells, those cells became more structured organisms. This is the proposition of the theory of evolution. Without an abiotic accumulation of the building blocks of the cell, no life could ever evolve. No life could ever evolve. So this second proposition of evolution is prebiotic fluid. Has prebiotic fluid ever been proven by the theory of evolution? Has any evidence been found for prebiotic fluid? So no empirical evidence whatsoever. There is no empirical evidence for this. So what would these two fall into according to the theory of evolution? What would we categorize origins of life according to the theory of evolution and prebiotic fluid? Would it be yaqeen? Would it be i'tiqad? Would it be assumption? Would it be, what is the fourth one? Uncertainty. Or would it be imagination? I personally would go with the fifth, even if my life depended on it. Imagination. That the theory of evolution cannot account for the origins of life, and the prebiotic fluid has never been found. That amino acids formed in some water, and those amino acids became cells, and then those cells became organisms. In the same way, fossil record. The fossil record, we are told that the fossil record proves the theory of evolution. We are told this. Now remember, one important thing is that Richard Dawkins and Stephen Hawking are the new clergy for the Western Hemisphere. These are the new clergy. In the Middle Ages, you had the clergy of the church, the Catholic Church, and then the Church of England, that whenever the priest told you to believe something, you would believe it. In Islam, we've never had blind following in faith. We do not blind follow the clergy. There is no blind faith. As we mentioned at the beginning of the seminar, belief is built upon ilm, knowledge. This does not mean everyone must be trained in philosophy, theology, science. No, it means that person is convinced of his beliefs according to his level of knowledge, according to his mental capacity. It does not mean everyone must be versed in science and knowing these terms in science or philosophy or theology. This is not essential. What is essential is that person is convinced through knowledge for enough to fulfill his rational faculty, meaning fulfill the need of his rational faculty. This is the requirement. So the fossil record, biologists would tell us, or biologists who believe in evolution would want us to believe that the fossil record in fact proves the theory of evolution. Yet we have things like the Cambrian explosion. Over 500 million years ago, when paleontologists looking for fossil records, they would find fossils, and the Cambrian explosion is such an event over 500 million years ago that took place, that they find organisms, creatures existing fully formed creatures. Prior to this, the creatures that are found are small organisms. Now, evolutionists would want us to blindly follow them into believing that that period known as the Cambrian period, that period was formed by organisms that existed prior. But there is no real evidence for this. In fact, a quote from Richard Dawkins, which I copied from his book. This is a quote from him. The Cambrian strata are the oldest ones in which we find most of the major invertebrate groups. And we find many of them already in an advanced state of evolution. The very first time they appear, it is as though they were just planted there without any evolutionary history. So when observing the fossil record, even according to Richard Dawkins, when observing this fossil record, it would appear as if they just came without any evolutionary history. This is stated by Richard Dawkins in The Blind Watchmaker. So the fossil record itself is something which needs to be looked at. Now they present the example of the horse. Many of you may remember, they present the example of a horse, a small horse, and then the horse adapts until it is large. This is the next thing which is known as incremental steps. That evolution is caused by a slow, gradual process which takes millions and millions of years. Yet the Cambrian explosion was caused over 500 million years ago. Evolution, in terms of the theory of evolution, this is the time when it appeared was a very small moment of time. It is not sufficient for such organisms, such biological detailed structures to have evolved all of a sudden. The Cambrian explosion. This is an enigma which scientists have attempted to answer. This point about incremental steps. Incremental steps would mean that the organisms would develop with slow changes, that over time we would be able to observe the change after that change has occurred gradually. So we are not expecting something like this, half a bird, half a crocodile. This is not what we are expecting. What we are expecting is slow incremental changes, that those changes happen gradually until that creature has changed. Now, regarding this, there is a famous quote which is mentioned: if it could be demonstrated that any complex organism existed, this is a quote, organ existed, which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. Who stated this? Darwin. This is a quote from Darwin himself, that if an organ could exist which was formed, again, it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. And yet we know that in modern biology they have found many organisms, many things that exist, that what we call irreducibly complex, that if we were to take one function away from them, they would become defunct. Like we looked at with the flagellum and the flagella in the cell and in the bacteria. Now someone may say that DNA, there is a likeness between two creatures and the DNA between the two. But remember, to quote New Scientist magazine, nearly 75% of human genes have some counterpart in nematodes. In nematodes, what are nematodes? Millimeter long soil dwelling worms. So 75% of our genes are similar to a millimeter long worm. And that millimeter long worm was found in the Cambrian explosion. When the Cambrian explosion took place 500 million years ago, that worm was found. This does not mean that they share a common ancestor, as the new clergy would want us to believe, the new clergy of scientism. Scientism is the new religion of the Western Hemisphere, and Richard Dawkins is the clergy of that new religion. To finish, I've placed the divine names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is to touch upon something known as theodicy, the problem of evil. Many people ask, if God existed, then he must be wholly good, meaning completely good, as the Christians claim. But in Islam, we have the divine names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala manifests himself in many ways, which we know through His names and attributes, al-asma wa sifat. And we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is fa'alul lima yurid, the doer of what He wills. But I will not go into that in detail, but this is the conclusion of my lecture.